Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this inspiring and heartfelt Dr. Hartmut Rosa celebration. We are deeply honored and have witnessed such a moment of academic recognition and intellectual friendship here at the IE Lyon School of Management at the University Lyon 3. It's now my great pleasure to invite you, of course, to stay with us for the next part, the conference from Professor Hartmut Rosa, entitled From Agency to Execution, the Atrophy of Discretion in Everyday Life. We are, of course, all very curious to see how this will unfold and maybe also how it connects to your latest book that we already heard about, Situationen und Konstellationen vom Verschwinden des Spielraums, recently published in German and, to my knowledge, not translated yet, not yet. So in this sense, I think we have like an avant-premiere this evening. And without anticipating, of course, the content of your conference, the very notions of agency and decision-making, of course, resonate with us here at the School of Management. They point to questions that are central for our students, for future decision-makers, without excluding ourselves, faculty and researchers. Questions like how to act, how to decide, how to assume responsibility in complex organizational and social context. The conference will last about 30 minutes. For questions afterwards, I think the time frame is very, very, very short. So we'll see how that goes, but we are very, very happy to hear you now. So thanks again for being with us on this very special occasion. Professor Hartmut Rosa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sylvia Didier, for the kind introduction and the invitation and the opportunity to really present. It is about the new book, right, which I wrote, and it will be published with La Découverte a bit later. And I feel, as you said, that this might be a topic which really could be a shared interest between what you are doing and what I try to do. So I prepared a lecture for about 3.5 hours, but I know you all had a long day, so I will try to make it for 30 minutes. I think the basic idea, I mean, I know it sounds very difficult, right? But I think the topic is really, as you've also heard in the last hour, I start with the everyday experiences. I think I want to focus on a problem or on a thing we all experience, and we experience it in management and administration, but also in our everyday lives, right? So I want to move in, it has a lot of steps. I want to start with the referee in the football, the arbiter, I think it's in arbitre en français, yeah. And the conductor of the train and the hyperburger. I will tell you what I mean about this. I want to start when I talk about this, it's quite interesting. The book was very well received. It's my most successful book at least in Germany so far. But there was one criticism which said, "Oh, he's giving too many examples." Right? We call it anecdotes. Right? And of course, in sociology, anecdotes are something very bad because you cannot prove something through an anecdote. Right? You have a theory and then you prove it by, "Oh, my aunt experienced it last week" or so. But this is not how I work or how phenomenology works. I do take examples, different examples, and look at the morphology, at the structure of the experience. And by having a variation of examples, right, you try to identify a structural problem. So that's a very different way, and that's how I work. And that's why in this book I use many examples, and I want to start with some of them. And then explain what I mean by agency at execution, because that's my main argument, that there is a shift in the way we act in this world, and with that in the way we are in this world. We experience our lives and our everyday society, right? And then I want to briefly discuss, probably I shift number 4, but number 3, why is this shift from agency to execution, right? And then why this is a problem, we already talked about burnout, right? And this kind of problems. I think I have a new explanation, or maybe it's just a variation of what I tried to say before. And I was told, you know, I should end with some positive outlooks about the future. Let's not just frustrate our students and ourselves. But the thing is that even in the book, I do end with a kind of positive note. I think it's possible to somehow find a way out. So, okay, for instances, so the claim is there is a significant change in the way we act in our everyday lives, in the everyday life, but also in professional life. You could say in the way we interact with the world. And I would really want to say on all levels of our existence, right? So I started really, actually I came up with this observation, or with this theory, you could say, really from soccer, from football, right? From a football game, because I have two young colleagues with whom I wrote an article on how the VAR, you know what that is, video assisted referee, right? Changes, you could say, the logic of football, but at least the logic of being an arbitre, a referee, right? So what's going on there? Look, I mean, to be, it's really interesting, and we also taught a class. We had a class on why is football so interesting. We already talked about it earlier. So, but when you're a referee, it's really interesting. It has something to do with management, I would say, right? A referee is somehow trying to shape a game, right? The personality of the referee is important for how the game turns out, right? He can be very, very strict and kind of interrupt almost every minute, right? Or he can somehow let the game go with the flow and be a little bit more generous in the way he does it. And he is a kind of in permanent interaction with the players. He's also in interaction with the spectators, right? So actually I talked to referees and they find it very interesting. And now tomorrow, tomorrow I go to the Lit Cologne. It's a literary festival in Germany. And there I'll have a discussion with a famous German, maybe the most famous German coach now, Christian Streich, right? You might know him. He is the coach of my home team, Freiburg. And they all picked up on this observation, right, that there is a change in what a referee is and what soccer is. And I talked to some referees and they said, look, of course, we somehow, when we kind of, the question is, do I whistle? How do you call it? Pfeifen? I mean, do I interrupt or don't I interrupt, right? And they said, of course, they somehow, for example, they have in mind that 3 times they already, there's always difficult situations. And 3 times they already made decisions in favor of team A, right? Then the 4th time they probably they bent to prefer team B. It's a kind of justice, right? A sense of justice almost. But it also is a difference whether it's the first minutes of the game. There it's important for the referee to somehow gain control over the game, right? If it's the last minute, they somehow follow a different strategy. Or one referee told me, if it's 5-0 for team 1, then I probably will not call it offside if team B finally makes an advance, right? For example, right? And of course, there is a subtle influence of the spectators. I mean, that's why spectators are there, right? I mean, they get very loud. They want to be, they are part of the game, right? So the referee, when he has to decide, is this offside or not, somehow is placed in a complex situation. The question is, what is the score? How did he decide in the previous instances, right? And many other. I could talk about this for the whole half hour, but I don't have the time, right? But it's really, really interesting. And and as I said, this part of the situation is also. I mean, his character, his personality is also part of the situation. Players know it. One referee has rather this kind of line, and the other has another line, right? And so on. And now the video-assisted referee comes in, for example, with a handball, or which is a foul, right, or with the offside. And for this video-assisted referee, the situation is totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter if it's minute 1 or minute 90. It doesn't matter if it's 5-0 or not, right? It doesn't matter whether 4 tricky situations have been decided for team A or so. It's only actually it's actually the whole processes of the game is stopped. It's like cut-out situation, and then the referee is brought to the screen, and then you see, for example, with the calibrated line, it's very clear, right? It's a question of millimeters. It's one indicator, right? It's either offside or it's not offside. Or if the hand is up here, it's a handball. If the hand is down here, it's not a handball. Mr. Streich, I already discussed it with him. He says, that's so stupid. Handball depends on whether the player wants to do it, on intention, right? But it doesn't matter anymore in the new form, in the new video-assisted referee. So what I want to say is, there you clearly see, the old-fashioned referee is an agent, right? He uses judgment, right? He has a sense even for the players and for the game and for everything, right? He has to have a good eye. And the good eye is a kind of also metaphorically speaking, right? What does it do to the logic of the game if I now interrupt or if I don't interrupt, right? And he has to use there's only a German word. I wonder whether there's a French word for it. You cannot really put it in English. Fingerspitzengefühl, right? It means you have a kind of a sense of what's going on and what is doing justice to a situation. So, but with the new video-assisted referee, the referee, in that sense, at least in these instances, is no longer an agent. He's an executant, right? That's what an executor, you could say, implementing the rules and the logic of what the machine says. And actually, because I start my book with an example where even the referee says, I'm really sorry, I think it's wrong. But look, here is the image, so to speak. I have to call it a foul, right? The story was complex, but I don't give you the whole story. But the thing is, it disempowers, in a certain sense, everyone, right? I start with a situation. It's complex, so I won't give it to you. Where everyone said, please let this goal count, please, please. And they couldn't, right? So they all are disempowered by the logic of I call this, you know, the one thing is the situation where the referee is in, where the spectators are part of, and the players are part of, and everything is part of, the score and the time in the season and so on. But what the video-assisted referee does is it cuts out a constellation. And there you see in this constellation, player 1 is a little closer to the goal than player 2, so we call it offside, right? So that's one example, right? Now, I have another example, right? Where, for example, it was McDonald's. I call it Hyperburger because I don't want to get in a law fight with McDonald's. But that was a kind of real situation. There was a young girl, about maybe 10 years old, getting to the McDonald's store, and you could really see she probably was from a not well-off family, and she had saved her money to finally also get one of these Big Macs or a Hyperburger. Very great. I call it Hyperburger in the book, right? So she goes there and she buys this burger, and the salesperson is quite happy to say, oh, here's your burger, right? And then, unfortunately, when she unwraps the burger, it falls to the floor and someone steps into it, right? So it's very clear the salesperson would want to give her another burger, right? And that's the thing everyone also in the store would have wished for, just give her another one, right? But the rules and actually even the algorithms of the cash desk don't allow that. One burger paid, one burger given out, right? There's no way to somehow correct this. So it's just another situation where the salesperson is no longer an agent. He's just executing the rules. Actually, you could put a machine in his place. And one observation I have at this point, maybe I should have a look at the clock. One observation there I have is if the salesperson is allowed to give her a second burger, that certainly is a day where he will not suffer burnout, right? Because his action made a difference, right? He was kind of an agent executing judgment. And in that sense, Fingerspitzengefühl, right? A fine feeling for the situation and the consequences of the situation. He really was in a situation and he was acting. While if he simply says, sorry kid, one burger paid, one burger given out, that's it. Then he's just executing. It disempowers everyone there, right, in such a situation. It's the same with the train conductors. I don't know about France, but in Germany it's really interesting. I would really say a train conductor in the past 200 years was almost 200 years, was an agent. He had a real authority, by the way, right? Because he would walk through the train and then you would have to show your ticket. And there are millions of reasons why you might ride with a ticket which is not completely valid. right? You might be in the wrong class, for example, but there's also good reasons why you might, for example, your ticket is valid until 12 and now it's 10 minutes past 12. So you don't really have a valid ticket, but you're not simply free riding, right? Or of course you have these stories where you want to buy a ticket, but the machine is not working, right? Or for example, what happened to me, the machine was working, but only one, and there was a long queue, and the bus which brought me to the train station was late for half an hour. So I told the conductor, I'm really sorry, I couldn't buy this ticket, right? So I don't have a valid ticket. And now the conductor has to use judgment and a good eye, right, so to speak, and Fingerspitzengefühl. And really, you could really see this. I really looked into this. Conductors made use of it. So no, the official rule is if you ride with an invalid ticket, you pay twice the price. But conductors had the freedom to say, okay, in that case, it wasn't kind of, you didn't do it intentionally, so I give you the normal price. And I had one situation where he actually sold me, even I was a grown-up, a children's ticket, because he said, okay, in that case, let's do it differently. So he was an agent, right? He was using judgment. And nowadays, he's not allowed to. Even the machine doesn't allow it to him, right? It really, the logic and the rules, the logic of the machine says, invalid ticket means twice the price. If you think that's unfair, you have the possibility to write an email to some instance authority who actually doesn't know the situation at all. They don't know you, right? So their judgment is kind of based on constellation too. But actually the whole situation of why I don't have a valid ticket, or someone else, maybe the student, or you can come up with thousands of stories. The whole situation is reduced to the constellation, either you have a valid ticket or you don't. If you don't have a valid ticket, you pay twice the price. And then you can kind of come up with a process. But here you have the same problem. The conductor is no longer an agent, he's executing rules. You can actually really send a robot through the train, right? It would be basically the same thing. And it kind of, this sense of powerlessness in this situation, right, frustrates both, right? Actually, you don't have, if you're the passenger, there's no one to address. The conductor says, I'm sorry, it's not me who makes any rules here, right? And the conductor is kind of powerless too. He says, I would like to sell you a normal ticket, but I can't. And now, I don't know about France, right? Actually, so this is why I want to get into dialogue with you. But in Germany, and more than that in England and in Austria, there is a significant change in the way we grade papers since we are at a university here, right? Let's talk about ourselves. I really think you can really see this shift from being an agent who uses judgment, right? Who needs a good eye, a feeling for situations, to kind of becoming an executor or an actor, however you want to call it. You see this when you grade papers, because normally you look in the past. I'm quite old now, unfortunately, right? So I'm old-fashioned, and I always discuss it with the people working with me, and I insist I do it my way, right? And that means when I grade term papers, right, at the end of the term, I'm in a situation. I know the student who has written this paper, right? And it's a situation. I can see what we discussed in class. Probably I know the student, so I know what she was interested in, for example, right? I know how she has argued during the class sessions, and I know what maybe she has written in the last paper, so I see where she's coming from and where she's going, and I might find this is really interesting what you're doing here, right? Or this is a new take, or whatever. Or I could say, oh, actually, you've said that in your first class, and then you developed, and now you fall back, right? So it's also a situation where I have to use judgment and a good eye and so on. But now we are strictly advised to no longer grade papers like this. We grade them with a set of criteria, right? So actually I'm supposed to go through the term paper with a set of criteria which says, is the research question well developed? Yes or no? Is the structure of the paper convincing? Yes or no? Is the literature she or he draws on kind of the right one and with the right amount? Yes or no? Is the formalities correct? Yes or no? And then I add the yeses and I add the no's, and then I give the grade. And when the student comes to my office, I would say, look, this is your grade. It has nothing to do with me, right? I mean, that's the criteria. You can give it to the machine if you like. And actually, people use machines now. I always tell my students, that's fine. You write the term paper with AI, and I grade it with AI. You don't know what you've written. I don't know what you've written either, but the grade is... business is going on, right? No, but I mean, but I don't think, as you see, I'm pretty serious about it. That's what I mean. Our way of being in the world, of acting in the world is changing. And with this sense, for example, how do you grade a term paper? I think it's really important. I mean, I also have a chapter about, or half a chapter, about writing term papers. Because there you see this difference too. Let's say you give your students the task, write about how AI changes your life. Then you have a kind of an agent in a situation. She or he might start to think, what does it do to me? Where do I encounter AI? Where do I use it? What's good about it? What's bad about it? But they would start to discuss with each other. What do you think about AI? Over when they go to the cafeteria, for example, right? And they would ask their mothers and fathers, and they would pick up something on TV and read something and have special interests. And then you can really see how the term paper is kind of developing out of the personality, right? That's a kind of being an agent in this world. And what you really see, I mean, I forgot to do, I need 3.5 hours, okay? The thing with being an agent in a situation means that the situation and your actions are permanently changing each other. Like the referee in the soccer game, right? I mean, in the way he decides, he shapes the game, but he shapes himself too. It's really also, as I shape my personality when I discuss with students about their term papers, right? It's a kind of mutual shaping. Situations and actions are kind of interpenetrating, right? But with this kind of, when students kind of, what they do nowadays is they say, oh, it wasn't AI who has written that paper. But I took inspiration from AI, right? That's what they say, right? So they get 7 or 8 points of how AI could change our lives, 7 positive ones, 7 negative ones. And then what they do is a kind of curation of this. Actually, it's a very important thing. Agency, in my sense, means being in a situation where you act, right? The execution is very interesting. In that sense, it's always a before and after. There's a shift in temporality. I can make that point better with my last examples, the cook and the kid. And there you see, it's not just in our professional lives. It's really, and I find this so important, it's in our everyday lives, even in our pastimes, in our creative times. I think cooking, for me, actually I'm a very bad cook, I'm a non-cook, right? But that doesn't matter. Cooking for me is a kind of paradigm case for agency, right? A cook is right in the middle of the cooking, of the process, right? There are the smells, there are the sounds of things, right? There are maybe burning eyes because of the onions or so, right? But you're kind of in the middle of acting, and everywhere you have to use judgment. Oh, I could have a little more salt or a little more pepper or whatever it is, right? That's where you literally have to have Fingerspitzengefühl, right? A sense of your fingers, right? So you're in the middle of the meal and you are kind of, it's an interpenetrating agency, right? While now we have this, I don't know about France, in Germany we have a new instrument called Thermomix, you know this, right? A lot of people use it, right? And there you have exactly the same instance, right? The meal gets very well. It has nothing to do with you. It's not an expression of who you are. You don't have to use judgment and Fingerspitzengefühl and a good eye and anything. The machine does it. But the most interesting part is it's with Thermomix, but it's also when you, for example, when you try to create a story or a painting or music with artificial intelligence, right? Of course, I really wonder, I don't want to be simply a cultural pessimist who says, oh, in former times everything was better. No, it wasn't, right? But the thing is, let's say you do a painting. If you paint yourself, like in cooking, if you cook yourself, right? There is a kind of, you are in the situation, you are in the process. While when you tell, and it's really interesting, you can tell the machine, the AI, please give me a painting with a magician in the sea and a Viking or so, right? And then it presents you with a picture, could be quite nice. But then you say, oh no, I want to have it a bit darker and I want to have no weapons in it. And maybe you can somehow refer to the ocean in it or so. And so you could say, I'm still creative. It's true. But the interesting thing is you're always ahead of what the machine does or behind, right? At first, you kind of give a command, do this. It's like with the Thermomix, please do this now, right? And then you get the result and then you judge the result. But it's a very different way. It's a very different form of being in the process. So one of my claims is we are always in a situation as the referee, as the teacher, as the conductor, as the cook, but we kind of stand face to face with a constellation, right? You're never in a constellation. And the experience I have in mind there is if you take a photograph. This is my second to last example. Sorry, but then I'm done with examples. Okay. My second to last example is if you're in a situation like, don't worry, if you're in a situation like a wedding, for example, right? Let's say you are in a wedding or a celebration like a honorary doctor or whatever, right? Okay, let's forget about this. A funeral or a funeral is not good. A birthday or a wedding. You are in the situation. You participate, even if you're not the bride or the other one yourself, right? You're in the situation, and then you might sit in the audience and have tears in your eyes because you're moved, right? And then you think, oh, maybe I could make a video or I could take a photo. Then you really, observe yourself, you really feel how you kind of shift, you move out of the situation and face a constellation. That's really interesting. The mere thought of I could take the photo, you don't have to do it. The mere thought, somehow, it's really, that's phenomenology, right? It takes you out of the situation. Then you perceive this ceremony on stage like a constellation which you want to kind of frame and take home, right? So that's the difference, being in a situation and standing face to face with a constellation. And my last example with the kid, I found that very telling too. I've seen it in France, right? You play, or your kids play with Lego bricks too, right? So when I was young, of course, we had a lot of Lego bricks, yeah. And the idea was build something, right? And of course, what we built was not too impressive, right? Actually, I found someone sent me, that was very nice, in Denmark, a Danish Lego advertisement from 1981. There was a young girl who built a house, and this house wasn't really well crafted, right? It was totally uneven and so on. But the girl was proud and said, it's beautiful as it is, right? So the idea is, it's agency, right? You somehow have to draw on experience, on judgment, and you need a good eye to kind of build something. And what you build is expressive of who you are, right? So that's a situation. Clearly, the kid is in a situation. Here are the bricks. And you can really see how what he or she builds then kind of refers to their experiences and their aspirations, their dreams, and the stories they have just read, and so on. Nowadays, they also play with Lego bricks, but they get complete models, right? Build the Titanic ship, right? And they come in neat packages with a clear plan. So our kids are moving from agency to execution, right? They don't need judgment and anything. And the ship they build is not expressive of who they are. It looks great on the shelf, but then it's dead, right? So you see, the problem I'm talking about, moving from agency in a situation to a kind of executor of constellative logics, is pervasive. So I've said that. What is going on, right? I call it the atrophy of agency, judgment, and discretion. And I think, of course, that's true in management too. We already talked briefly about it when you go by indicators, right? I have a whole chapter on parametric optimization. You don't use judgment, a good eye, and the situation. You measure certain things, and then you try to improve it. You work on them. We always work on constellations we are in situations. So I think I'm sure you can come up with thousands of examples of that in administration and business administration and so on. So why do we do it? I mean, there's a whole number of reasons. One is the whole logic of algorithms, right, of computers, but that's not the main driving factor. I mean, for me, it's the simple answer is whenever you have judgment, you can misjudge, right? I mean, you never get the optimum result. And actually you can misjudge on purpose. That's corruption, right? If you want to make sure that there is no corruption, don't give with a conductor or with a burger salesperson. Of course they could have a kind of shadow business, right? Their friends always get the free burger, or you never punish your friends when they free ride on the train, right? So clearly corruption is one reason why we go to constellation, but also kind of bias. Maybe you always have a weak spot if the little girl needs a second burger, but you would never give it to an immigrant, right? For example, right? So actually, so some bad persons could always send small kids or so. No, but I find it's really important for me. What I write in the book, what I want to say is, it is a kind of emancipatory project to ensure equal treatment. that really means there is no judgment, right? Everyone can be sure that he or she gets equal treatment. That's true for the students. Students don't want that professors have a lot of discretion, because they will tell you, oh, of course, this has always been your favorite student. She gets an A, right? But you never liked me, so I get a D, for example, right? So they will require clear criteria. How did you arrive at this judgment? And it's important to see this, right? It's a kind of emancipatory project. Equal treatment requires elimination of judgment, of space for discretion. And there is accountability and reliability in management, I think, in organization. That's very important, right? You have to know who made which decision and where did a process go wrong and who was responsible for the process. There you have you need clear criteria. You need a kind of constellative logic there, right? And you could really say discretion, the space for discretion, for judgment, is an obstacle to efficiency. I mean, that's an argument I will move on quickly, but when you want to optimize something, right? Actually, we can go back to soccer, but Taylorism. I think there's a new Taylorism even in the world of management, right? But I'll make the argument with soccer. If you want to improve your being a soccer player, right? Normally you would say just play, go out on the street. There are kind of street courts, right? Play, and when you play every day, you become quite good in playing. But there is a limit to improvement, right? If you want to really become a professional player, you kind of practice. Then you go to the logic of parametric optimization. You have to train the speed, right? The starting speed when you run. But you have to improve your physical endurance, Kondition in German, right? So you have to do that. But also you train stopping a ball, you train passing a ball, you train the angles, you train everything. You have to kind of break up the situation of playing soccer into individual bits, individual movements. That's what Taylor did. Not Charles Taylor, but Frederick Taylor, right? He kind of broke down every movement to optimize it and to speed it up. And I think that's a bit the logic of the management, I would say, of some forms of organization and management. Break up all the processes and find indicators and then improve every individual indicator. So the logic of optimization is kind of at least in a clear tension with the logic of having space for discretion, right? So I leave that aside, even so their health would be coming up. And of course, it's also a consequence of what I call dynamic stabilization. We talked about it, right? The need to achieve permanent growth, acceleration, and innovation kind of forces us to optimize everything, right? To get an optimum result. It's like when you use the Thermomix. If you're a cook yourself, one day it's too salty and the next day it's too, I don't know, it's somehow imperfect, right? Or if you lack experience, you want to get a very good meal. If you use Thermomix, it's always close to perfect, right? So the logic of optimization is one of the reasons. So I said that. And I said there is an ubiquitous trend. By the way, I find health, because some of you, I understood, work on it too, right? I find that very interesting too, because health is always a kind of situation. If I ask you, are you healthy? Do you feel? I could even, no, let's ask, are you healthy, right? There are two ways to answer it. One is kind of turning inward to say, yes, I'm quite healthy, right? Right now I don't cough, I don't have a stomach ache, no headache, I'm healthy, right? The other is taking to parameters. What's your blood pressure, what's your heart rate, what's your oxygen saturation, your insulin level, your blood levels anyway, right? That's, again, parametric optimization. You break down the situation of health into a whole host of individual parameters, and then you can work on them individually, right? So in organizational performance, in individual performance, in health, everywhere we kind of move from judgment based on experience, right, to parameters, to indicators which we work on. And this, I think, for me, this was very important. I really claim, and this is how it connects to what I did in the past, right? With our way of being in the world, with our way of what we are as persons, right? Because what we are as persons, I follow Dan Zahavi, the Danish philosopher, who says it depends on our perceptive structure, you could say, and on our volitional structure. What does that mean? What do you pay attention to? What are you aware of? Right? So when we move through the world, there are some things we are very sensitive to, right? We pay attention to. And there are some things we want to go for, we aim at, right? A volitional structure. What do you want to achieve? What do you look for, right? What is your, it's a kind of perceptivity, attentivity. What are you aware of? What are you attentive to? And you see, when you think about health, right? One thing is I could be attentive to how do I feel, right? For example, right? The other is I'm attentive to my blood pressure. Oh, I have to do something about my blood pressure. I'm attentive to my insulin level. Oh, I have to take something for my insulin level. So it changes my awareness, my attention, and it changes my volitional structure. And it's the same with teaching. What do I want to be sensitive to in class? And when I teach students, right, what is my perceptive? I really claim resonance requires a wide-angle attentiveness, right, listening to what's going on in the classroom, and also listening to what a student really wants to do, or so, right? And volitional structure is a very different. I don't want perfect term papers. I want them to learn something, right, to become real sociologists since I'm teaching sociology. So my claim is when we move from agency to execution, we change our perceptive awareness and our volitional structure, and therefore our way of being in the world. I have to move on. Oh yes, the burnout argument. I think I have a perfect argument. You can have the slides if you like. But the argument is very easy. I take it from Eva Illouz. No, I don't take it. The starting point is Eva Illouz, right? She's teaching in Paris, right? She says it's emotions which give us the energy to act. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, right? As agents, you find yourself placed in a situation, right? And in this situation, you have certain feelings, like the train conductor or the burger seller, or even I as a teacher, right? And there I feel something. I want to help the students, or I somehow want to kind of break that other student because he talks always, or so. Whatever it is, in situations, you develop certain emotions. Situations is something I interpret. And I interpret it along the lines of significance. That's Charles Taylor, right? And that means it's connected to my emotions. It means something to me. I want to do something, right? Whatever it is. So emotions give me the energy to act. But the logic of constellation means your emotions are totally irrelevant here. It's like with the referee, right? In the initial example I had, the referee really wanted to not call it a foul play at that place, right? But the rules say your emotions, your judgment are totally irrelevant here. Just follow the rules, enact the logic of what you have to do. It's the same with the train conductor. You might have a student crying because he forgot his ticket. He would say, it's nothing to do with me. No valid ticket, twice the price. So it really means all day. It's not just, we either have to act against our emotions, or our emotions are totally irrelevant for what you do. Right? Just do, even in cooking. We say, I like that example. In Germany, I don't know about France. In Germany, we say, if it's very salty, we say the cook probably was in love, right? I don't know why, but it means emotions directly translate into the action, right? You can tell from the result, the emotional state, if you so like. And what the constellative logic does, and it does it on purpose, right, is cut the tie between emotion and action. Optimize the action, follow the parametric rules, and it doesn't matter what you think, right? What should be done. And if that's true, it means we clearly lose the energy to act, right? Because the energy to act, I said, comes from our emotions. And if I have to suppress my emotions all the time, it's no wonder I feel burnout at the end of the day, right? So I would really say the burger seller who can never interact as a person, right, is quite likely to get burnout, while the burger seller who says, oh, here is another one, or the train conductor who says, okay, today I'll be generous, right, but tomorrow bring your ticket or so, right? They are agents. They will not suffer burnout. And in the healthcare systems and in the educational systems and in actually I think even for managers, right, or whatever it is, if you have to govern a team, right, if you're an agent in a situation, right, you probably not get easily burnout. But if you feel if you tell your team, it's not me, there's nothing I can do, that's what we have to do, right? We have to write this stupid report. Every one of you finds it stupid, I find it stupid too, but we have to send the figures. So that's what creates burnout, right? If you lose the connection between emotion and action. I can explain everything. Actually, I can even explain, I don't know. I think we should always aim high. But of course, everyone wonders, how could Trump and Musk, this infernal duo, be elected in the United States? Right? And the main explanations we get is, Well, because the educational system in the US is not very good. I don't find that convincing. By the way, we have people like Trump and Musk everywhere. We had Boris Johnson and Berlusconi, right? And we have AfD in Germany, right? And so on, and Le Rassemblement, whatever. So I don't think that's a good explanation. I think what Trump does very clearly, and Musk also, they really stood for the promise to be real agents. That's what Trump says all the time. I don't care about international rules. I don't care about international treaties. I don't care about political correctness. I act on the basis of my sound judgment. That's what he says, right? There we clearly see that judgment isn't always sound. And the thing is, I really think, I mean, I would need an extra 20 minutes to explain that what Trump does is not being an agent in a situation. He destroys the situation. Actually, he doesn't even accept a situation like being a referee. Doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, right? The referee cannot decide that the game will last 3 hours today, right? It means you are acting in a certain frame, right, which has a kind of built-in logic, and you use spaces for maneuver within this frame. So certainly Trump and Musk are not the ideals, the heroes of what I want to say, but I can explain why people vote for them, because they promise to be real agents in a world which is kind of becoming dead of simply executing logics. So I've done that too. How could it be different? This is it's the last point I want to make, and then I will stop. Because I think it could be different. I mean, what I find really interesting, and you know it probably, but normally one doesn't have it too easily in mind, this here, that of course, we still don't act simply along the constellative logics. We have not become simple executors. And you find this in German, right? We say eigentlich, right? You would say, the office is closed. The eigentlich ist das Büro zu. Ja. Aber kommen Sie noch rein, right? It means, in fact, or actually, the office is closed, but I will still serve you, right? Or I, as a teacher, would say, actually, if I follow this set of criteria, I would have to give you a D, but I'll give you an A because I see how inspired you were, right? So, and actually we use this kind of actually in all sets of circumstances, even in technology, right? Actually, this plug doesn't go with this computer, but we'll try it anyway, or I know how to manipulate it, right? Or actually, this form which you have to fill in is not supposed for this process or purpose, but we will use it anyway, right? Or whatever it is, or even when you cook, actually this herb or this spice is not supposed to go with this food, but I'll use it anyway, right? So basically we still do it, right? And we think, and that's an argument I take from Florian Hoffmann from Rio de Janeiro. In our Western European societies, we think whenever you do this actually move, you almost feel you have to apologize, right? You do something wrong, right? It means either the rules are imperfect or the technology is imperfect or so, right? We think that the bureaucratic rationality and the technological rationality actually should make it unnecessary to do the actually thing, right? Niklas Luhmann has written a whole book on, or actually Stefan Kühl, who is following him, brauchbare Illegalität, right? And you might know this, right? It's really shocking. I mean, I'm not sure whether that book is in French, right? But I can really recommend it with deep L, it's easy, right? This is a German sociologist, Stefan Kühl, who has really looked at organizations and proved how often, every day, at every place, people break the constellative logic. This is why we still are agent, right? But we somehow make it, with the new technologies, we make it more and more difficult, right? But yeah, people break the rules everywhere and in every place. There was something I want to say, I forgot, doesn't matter. Okay. And now Florian Hoffmann says, it's interesting, in Brazil they have a name for it, jeitinho. It means, is someone from Brazil here? No, okay. But the question is it a good or a bad thing? And in German, for those of you who speak German, we have the word Schlitzohr. Someone is a Schlitzohr, right? And that's very interesting. It means someone. It means the same, right? Jeitinho means the small way, the back alley, so to the back street, so to speak, right? You don't do it quite by the rules, but you find a way that is adequate to the situation, right? And it's the same what the German Schlitzohr means. It's someone who doesn't quite play by the rules, by the rules, but finds good solutions, right? And of course we see it's kind of ambivalent there, because Chaitanya as the Schlitzohr might be unfair, right? Might do things which are really bad, right? Which are forbidden, basically, right? So there's a certain ambivalence there. But you find in almost all cultures of the world, in Brazil, they say Chaitanya is the strategy, the capacity to find a solution. Now, the interesting thing is that something that is fair, just, or good to a situation might not be what is fair, just, or good in the logic of the constellation. It's an argument by Aristotle, right? I mean, he distinguishes between justice and, now I don't know what the English word for the other thing is. He has two forms of justice, right? One is justice according to the rules. The other is justice according to the situation. And the two very often fall apart. And this is why bureaucracy grows and grows and grows, because you always realize, oh, life is more complex than the logic of the constellative rules, that you have to come up with additional constellative rules. But it simply never fits, right? So we need to be agents, right? We need to use judgment and so on. So I think these cultural technologies, you find it in all languages, in Chinese, with Guangxi, in Blood, in Russian, Ubuntu, in whatever. Almost all cultures have this sense you somehow have to still be an agent in the society, and we have somehow lost it, but it is possible. In the last chapter, I discuss an example from the healthcare systems in Germany, where they have really changed the rules because they said, it's my final point, I swear. We have changed, there is an insurance for healthcare, for the Pflege system, for the care, for the very old people, right? And now you can get insurance for this, but it led to a situation where there were exactly 22 possible actions, right? And those who were in the healthcare system somehow were clearly, they were obliged, they had a kind of scheme which said, with this, they go to the homes of persons, right? And then they have to, but then they have a clear schedule. With this person, you have to do the washing, maybe you wash the person and cut the nails and nothing else, right? For example, right? Or with that other person, you have to do some other things, bathing and so on. But you didn't have any space for judgment or discretion. And everyone knows how frustrating, and they really got burnout by the record numbers, because when the care persons, the people working there, they went to the homes of these elderly people and they saw today, oh, what you really need is someone to talk to today, right? Not nails cutting. Or, oh, the cat is hungry, it will starve if I don't feed the cat, right? It's hundreds of situations, right? Every day it's a new situation. And of course, in the situation that triggers an emotional reaction, what I should do in this case. And the people were never allowed. So actually it created burnout with the care persons, and it created dissatisfied customers. So it was a long process of negotiation, but they changed the rules. Now those doing the care work do have space for discretion, right? And they say, and I find this really interesting, they say, this is what gives me back my energy, right? And it helps me to kind of invigorate the patients too, right? Because now we are agents encountering each other, people meeting each other, looking each other in the eye and talking to each other and finding solutions which are adequate to the situation and not to some constellative logic. But I find it very important to see that such a shift requires that the prime moment is that we trust each other. Trust, I mean, we talked about trust earlier, right? And not distrust. I think the kind of default logic is distrust, right? Assume that everyone uses every space he has, right? Every room for judgment for his own sake. And I think society will break down in the end if we follow this logic. Because look, every teacher, not every teacher, but 99% of teachers want to be fair teachers. Like 99.5% of referees in a football game want to be good referees. So it's totally stupid to assume that they always misjudge and do the wrong thing, right? So I think, and it's important, judgment is not, I mean, the capacity for judgment is inborn in human beings. But if you never train it, right? If we don't develop a society, a culture, which is based on encountering each other as agents in this world, then, we will lose the capacity for judgment. in political systems, in social systems, in psychological situations, and we will get into a burnout world. But it's not an inevitable phase. I was supposed to end up with some positive notion, and I've really seen in that case, it is possible, right? I think, and for management, I would really want to say that too. Let's move from a system which kind of tries to control every single action to a system which only does a kind of meta supervision. If you find there is really something wrong in one one process or the other, then we have to intervene, but not on the everyday level, and then we can create a better world. Thank you very much for your long patience.
A better word is possible. That's, I think, really nice to end. Dear Hartmut Rosa, on behalf of the IAE School of Management at the University Lyon 3 and everybody gathered here in the room this evening, I would like to express our sincere gratitude for your insightful and deeply stimulating lecture. Thank you very much. You have given us, I think, a lot of things to reflect upon, not only as researchers and professionals in business, but as human beings navigating the complexity of modern life and work. Your reflections on agency, discretion, and structures, they shape our everyday action, resonates powerfully, and I think you showed it with a lot of nice examples that talk to us. That resonates with the themes that animate our institution: responsibility, meaning, and the human dimension of management and education. I would also like to thank all the participants for your attentive presence, and I would have liked to say their thoughtful questions, but I think we don't have the room right now, so I have to use my judgment on this, and I did this of course, I asked my colleagues before doing this. So to continue this exchange across disciplines, languages, and perspectives, we would like to invite you to, there's a next event waiting for us where we can maybe get in resonance and continue to stay in resonance and stay in dialogue. As you mentioned, it's so important to have this dialogue. So Hartmut Rosa, thank you once again for your generosity, for your clarity and your inspiration. It has been an honor and a pleasure to welcome you here in Lyon, and we hope to see you soon again and to continue this collaboration. Thank you very much. Thank you.